Hello and welcome to a very special Apple Extravaganza. It's slightly different this week, as you'll have seen already. If I just sort of bring this piece of paper into screen, that sort of gets it across that we're doing the usual thing, but slightly differently. My name's Chris. I'm the editor of MacFormat. I'm in MacFormat's hometown of Bath, but Mr. Matthew Bolton, who you'll see in a second, is in Berlin. Say hello, Matt.
Hello, I am in Berlin. I'm going to go full Eurovision. Hello, this is Berlin calling.
And the reason Matt's in Berlin is because he's been attending the Apple event. Now, obviously, if you're following Apple stuff, then you'll know that Apple's just launched a whole load of new bits of kit, and Matt's been playing with some of them. So we thought we'd do a bit of a chat and talk about the stuff he has been seeing. Incidentally, I believe that since we're doing this on Google Hangouts, you'll probably see a little button somewhere that you can click to tell us how we're doing. You can sort of, it's a little clapometer, and you can ask questions, which apparently will appear somewhere. So we'll see if we can answer those as well. But Matt, first off, just general impressions of the whole event.
It was quite long. That was, I really felt that, especially at the start. They went over a lot of stuff we've seen before, and then we got to some really exciting things, and then some things got weirdly glossed over. It had a strange pace overall. Okay, I guess I'm sure Apple knows what it's doing as far as reintroducing Yosemite before it announced that it's immediately available, and talking back over iOS 8 before it announces that 8.1 is out very soon, and things like that. But still, it was kind of it just had an odd pace.
And also, there was some slightly politically odd decisions taken in there. So there was a kind of tacit acknowledgement that they'd screwed up on iOS 8 when the iOS 8.1 stuff was introduced by Air Force One, by Craig Federighi, by saying, would you listen to the feedback that we get from you guys? Which was an interesting political move. Apple doesn't usually sort of admit mistakes like that.
I guess it's doing it a bit more these days. We've been talking about Apple being a little bit more open, a little bit more friendlier and fluffier. So I guess I wasn't surprised. I mean, I was a little bit surprised at the camera roll, but like on a personal thing, because I wasn't really bothered about it going. So I was sort of, oh, you're reintroducing that one. All right then, whatever.
All right. Well, let's crack on with going through the stuff that was announced. And even though the iPad Air 2 is probably the sort of sexiest, biggest consumer launch in there, the thing that obviously I'm most excited about, and I expect you are too, is the 5K iMac.
Yes, it is the iMac with Retina display, and in this case, the Retina display is further called a 5K Retina display.
Yeah.
Just to get all the names going. Yeah, I've seen it. It's pretty amazing.
So basically, it looks identical from the outside, if you like. If you saw
I asked, and they said that it is identical on the outside. Basically, same number of ports, same thickness, no thicker than the last one was. All the same size around the edge and everything. They said it comes in a slightly larger retail box, but it's just extra padding because they are really, really treating it delicately for you. Yeah.
So the thing about this is, it's just a whole mess of pixels. It's a 5,000 odd by 3,000 odd pixel display.
1520 by 2880.
Thank you. You've just been writing with this, haven't you?
Pixels, specifically. 14.74 million pixels. Yeah, it's loads. It's about 216 pixels per inch, which in Apple's great lineup isn't particularly high. The iPad Air is 260 pixels per inch, but like at the distance you sit away from a desktop computer compared to an iPad.
And of course, the new iPhone 6 Plus has a 401 ppi resolution, but again, like even closer. The point being that because it's further away, the pixels don't have to be quite so fine. Incidentally, can I just say before you go on, people are asking questions, which is fantastic, and I see them coming inside of my screen. We will answer some of those shortly. So if you're watching this on Google Hangouts, please do ask your questions, and I'll grab some right to ask Matt shortly. But yeah, go on about the pixel density.
It's just So it like. Even the thing with when it's a screen that size, even if you lean in to try to see the pixels, you're still not going as close as you do to a phone because it's just you just treat things of that size differently. And yeah, I was I was going right in. It's just madness. They had some 8K images from a Hasselblad loaded up, and to see like it's zoomed out, it's crazy detail, and then it just blows it up to 100%. You can see even more ludicrous detail, and there's not even, I was going to say, that much getting cut off the screen, but I suppose it goes up sort of by percentages when you talk about 8K.
And of course, one of the reasons people have been talking about a Retina iMac for a while, and it makes sense that Apple would do it, and we've been saying for a long time that we expect it to happen before the end of the year, and we even said we expect it to happen at this event. The fact that it went 5K is indeed 4 times the res of the previous high-end iMac, so that's in keeping with Apple's Retina strategy, if you like. But some people were surprised by 5K, but of course one of the really nice things about a 5K display is it lets you edit 4K content, like Ultra HD, really high-res, insanely detailed content at 1:1, and still have space around that screen to have your tools.
Yeah, and I saw that in practice too, and like it is also really good. We stuck Final Cut in full screen, and we had a timeline put together of various 4K clips, and more 4K clips visible from kind of your bins, your storage on the side, and just hit play, and it was really smooth playing back all the 4K stuff. They told me the one I was looking at was actually the entry-level model, rather than one of the beefier ones, kind of to impress on me how impressive the performance really is, if you see what you mean.
It starts at £1,999, but you can spec it up to about £3,500.
I haven't seen the spec listed stuff, but I'm not surprised. The GPU that they said you could spec it up to, I don't think is even out yet officially, or like in any other model, and it's like brand new architecture stuff. As the low end GPU.
Tell me about the graphics card then, because this is something you know more about than I do. Tell me about the power it has and how capable that is to power that ridiculous 14 megapixel image.
So the M290X is actually a rebrand of a slightly older card, because the 290 AMD 290 card on the desktop is a huge, whacking, great top-end thing, really powerful. The one that they're using in the low-end, high-end iMac, the low-end Retina iMac, is much more powerful than the mobile card we had in the 27-inch iMacs, but like isn't crazy high-end. It's just very good, especially for a mobile machine. It's quite often you'll end up with both AMD and NVIDIA. You'll have cards that have the same name in mobile and desktop, and the desktop one is much more powerful. And in this case, the M290X that's in use in the low-end one is as powerful as the desktop version of the mobile card the 27-inch one uses, if you can possibly follow my strings of logic around the pins.
I'm following you so far. So that's the GPU, and we think it's pretty capable. I mean, it's not a full high-end.
I have concerns about how far it will go for pros, basically, but that's what the higher-end option is for. And I don't know how long it will be before we see a identical cinema display that can connect up to the Mac Pro. And that will be your pros option, obviously.
Which is worth saying as well that as far as we know, you can't use the 5K Retina iMac as a display itself, as you could with the previous iMacs and the other ones that stay in the lineup. But you can drive another 4K display out of the iMac. Apart from anything else, it's got Thunderbolt 2 ports at the back, so there's tons of I/O bandwidth there as well. And one quick question for you from Adam Drew, who asks, does the Core i5 pack enough punch for the new iMac, or should Apple have opted for a low-end multi-core i7?
As far as I know, the Core i5 is still quad-core. I haven't seen what the i7 option is compared to the Core i5 in this case. Like, I don't know if it's just the case that the i7 is probably a tiny bit faster but will have hyper-threading, whereas the Core i5 doesn't. This will depend to a certain degree on what you plan to do with it. If you're going to use image editing stuff that's heavily GPU based, then you're not going to miss out on having some extra virtual cores. If you're going to do Final Cut video editing, again, it moves a lot of stuff to the GPU. I don't think you'll mind that much. If you're going to hit a bottleneck, I can imagine some other places where it's going to be like storage.
But basically, from you having seen it and actually being in the room with it, you think it is gorgeous. And you've talked a lot about the fact that you think you might save up for the Retina iMac when it comes. Is it the machine you want?
Yeah, it's close enough. I don't like that that it only has 8 gig of RAM. I think that is miserly, frankly, for something that costs £2,000. It is user replaceable though, unlike certain other machines that we'll get to later. But yeah, you can upgrade that yourself, so you can upgrade to 16 or 32 for, well, 16 for about 80 quid or something, so that's not the end of the world. Like, it would be nice if Apple gave you I think a machine of that strength at that price, 16 gigabytes of RAM is not an unreasonable expectation. Or even 12, just not 8.
Yes, it is quite small, and as you say, it's the full range of the iMacs remains there below the Retina iMac, the 5K iMac. And once you get to that point where it is, as you say, £2,000 in sterling for the 5K iMac, it starts to sound like an expensive, though frankly not a ludicrously expensive machine, but that 8 gig of RAM is a little bit pokey, especially if you're going to be doing any kind of high-end creative work.
Yeah, I don't think the price is unreasonable at all, especially with a Fusion drive and some other good stuff that's in there. Yeah, just more RAM, why not? Come on.
Yeah.
But to kind of go back a little bit, just whatever I saw the iMac doing, as far as the power that it has, it did perfectly smoothly. And as I say, I was told that what I was looking at was the entry-level one. Zooming in and out of these colossal images, no problem at all. 4K video that was, in the process of being edited. When I was watching the playback, it was going from clip to clip along the timeline rather than some pre-exported 4K video that I was just watching back. And it was doing all of that perfectly smoothly, no stuttering, no hang-ups, nothing like that. Obviously, it's a demo machine in a demo situation, so real life may vary, but I was surprised when I was told that I was just looking at the entry-level one and we were doing all of these crazy pro things without problems.
But you were talking there about the RAM being upgradable for the in the iMac, but that brings us to the Mac Mini, which, hooray, has been upgraded, but incidentally doesn't allow upgradable RAM, user upgradable RAM.
Not on any of the models, because the entry-level model is a little bit like the entry-level iMac and is a little bit like the
entry-level MacBook Air.
They all share the same basic guts, the difference being that the Mac Mini and the iMac have a hard drive and the MacBook Air has an SSD.
Which brings us incidentally to a question from Fabio Virgi, who says that the inferior 1.4 GHz processor is slightly frustrating to me. What are your thoughts on the compromise to achieve a lower price point? It's a similar approach to what's done with the iMac recently, as you've just said.
Yeah. And much like the iMac, I would say I wouldn't mind those specs at those price with an SSD instead of the hard drive, myself. Other people will want the 500 gig hard drive that is provided because they want space to store stuff. I'd say it's a better deal with even just a 128 gig SSD because it will feel nippier. Yeah. The fact that the processor and graphics are a bit limited just doesn't matter as much if you've got an SSD, because most of the things you do when you're just using it in very general use, just opening apps, searching your iTunes, doing whatever, is more reliant. The bottleneck is the speed with which it's fetching these things rather than the speed with which it can execute them. And
to be clear, for example, the bottom end Mac Mini has a 1.4 gigahertz processor in it, and that is a little bit weedy, but it's acceptable. But as you say, the bottleneck is the fetching, especially the little bitty bits of data during startup, during app launches, that kind of stuff. You're trying to seek a lot of stuff from different parts of a hard disk at once. And even though the low-end iMac is £299, which is bringing it back down again to the kind of price points we like the Mac Mini to be at, because it had crept up a little while. that 500 gig hard drive is going to be a real bottleneck, and you have to then do build-to-order options to swap it in for an SSD.
Yeah.
Worth noting as well that the graphics in the mid-range and the high-end Mac Mini specs is pretty decent. It's Iris graphics. No, it's not Iris Pro, but it is Iris, so it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's
500. Sorry, 5,000 in the entry level.
My biggest issue though is the 4 gig of RAM in the entry level iMac with no user upgradable option. Basically, it's not good enough. Like, it just means that you need to be sure that you will never want to do anything intensive with that thing. Like, there's no headroom to grow if you want to keep it for however long in the future. I don't mind the 1.4 gigahertz processor. I've seen people do full HD video editing on...
My wife, indeed, uses her 1.2, maybe even, or 1.4 gigahertz MacBook Air to do full HD video editing. It's not an especially pleasant experience, but it's capable of it. As you say, as you start
to work with, uses Final Cut to do some of our videos, in fact. And, like, the export is slow, but working on it is actually okay. It's not a strong processor, that's just a fact, but that's not where I think Apple has really kind of weakened it, if you see what I mean, or weakened the proposition. There are other places I'd like to see it more. But it is cheaper than it's ever been. It is still a very nice option, a very quiet option for the right kind of buyer. I would absolutely recommend it, but I think it could be more.
Yeah. But let's say again, hooray, poor little iMac, 3 years since it was last updated, has finally been updated.
Mac Mini.
Sorry?
Mac Mini, not iMac.
Sorry, yes, Mac Mini. Finally been upgraded, which is terrific. It's so good to see that little machine getting some love, and it will be a good machine for people coming new to Mac, or who just need a quiet little capable machine to sit in an office. Like they've already got, it was the BYOD mentality that Apple introduced the Mac Mini with. If you've got a screen, if you've got a keyboard, you've got a mouse, put this in place of your struggling old Dell Inspiron or whatever it is, and then you've got a decent little setup.
Yeah, and in some ways it's going to do its job better than ever with the new setup because it's going to be quieter than ever. It's going to use less power than ever. So, if it's the situation is that you want it to be this silent little thing that's not kicking out heat, that's not kicking out fan, as an HTPC or as something that does sit on your desk close. If you're limited to space, it's close to wherever you work. Lovely stuff. But yes, I really wish they put a small SSD in because you can expand the rest of its storage very easily. But starting off from a fast point would have been.
Yeah, and even if, as you say, even if it was a 128 gig SSD, even maybe conceivably a 64 gig, the fact that you could stick, as you say, a big hard disk on the outside of that's not a problem. But the fact that the RAM itself can't be upgraded, isn't user upgradable. I guess when I say can't be upgraded, I mean can't be upgraded with the user. There will doubtless be OWC and people like them offering upgrade paths on your behalf. But that's going to be an expensive thing.
Especially in the case of the low-end one, it's like literally soldered onto the logic board, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe for the higher-end ones.
All right, let's crack on with some iOS stuff. So, iPad Air 2.
Yes.
You have an iPad Air and you like it a great deal.
I do.
Is there a transformational difference in the weight, the heft, the ergonomics with this new, thinner, lighter iPad Air 2?
Not in the time. I don't feel it in the time that I've used it. Not just in the ergonomics, at least. But it is, crazy thin. Have you seen its exact weight?
Not to hand, I'm afraid, no.
I haven't seen it in the stuff I've been doing, the work I've been doing since I've been here. I asked.
So the iPad Air 2 is 437 grams, which is compared to 469 grams for the iPad Air. So essentially,
it is lighter.
Difference.
It was just because the Apple person I spoke to here about that, because they didn't mention it during the keynote or anything. So when I was picking it up and playing with it, I spoke to someone from Apple, and they were weirdly cagey about it.
Right.
Well, it's lighter, so good.
But I mean that is one thing, because obviously one of the reasons that Apple spent so much time and effort talking about how thin the iPhone 6 was compared to the iPhone 5S is because that in every other physical respect it was worse. It was a bigger footprint, it was heavier,
Yeah.
than it was, but it was thinner. Here at least it's thinner and also lighter, albeit by a negligible amount.
Yeah, and I mean it is just ludicrously thin. It is just this tiny sliver in your hand, um, and the new screen kind of bonded closer to the glass. It does have a really nice pop. It does.
And what was the anti-reflective coating like?
Yeah, so that's I'm standing under this lighting setup that we've got in our demo room, and the screen was perfectly clear. It was lovely. And that's the kind of thing that helps the colours to pop. That's the thing. It's like they don't even need to make the screen better if they can make it.
I presume that the screen is still it's still glossy.
It's still got a glass coating.
Yeah.
The idea, I guess.
Not a glass coating as such. It is glass. But,
yes, that coats it. Come on. It just, yeah, I guess whatever it does to scatter the light that hits it or whatever, it just means that you get these less harsh angles from as the light come in. You don't see these big square bits encroaching onto kind of what you're trying to see, paling out the colours and things.
I presume you wouldn't get any sense in a demo room, as you see, fluorescent lit, artificially lit demo room, about how much difference it would make outside. Is it likely we'll see any difference in the daylight performance of that screen?
I think you would at least a bit, but I really couldn't say to what degree. From where I've seen, it's dark and rainy.
More things that are new in that. So we've got the A8X processor, and as you commented when you were doing the MacFormat Live feed, they didn't do an X generation the last time round.
No, which is it. Without going too much into the history of this particular GPU line that Apple uses, they used a new generation of GPU in the A7. And so to that degree, it wasn't surprising that maybe they didn't do an X. Maybe there wasn't a higher tier one they could make in the necessary numbers. There actually was an obvious model candidate to be an A7X, but for whatever reason they chose not to use it. Fine, they didn't need to. It was great. It was more than powerful enough as is. This time they obviously have, which I really wouldn't know how much to read into, but the figures they're giving for how fast and capable it is are pretty astonishing.
Yes, because if you look at the graph of the CPU improvement since the original iPad, now I might get this particular figure wrong, but I think it was 10 times faster for CPU performance, but the GPU performance was over 100 times faster, and that is just the kind of the kind of advance you can get with these multi-cluster parallel processing, highly efficient graphics chips. 3 billion transistors compared to 1 billion in the A7 is insane.
Yeah. What is it?
Transistors fitted onto the chip.
In the regular A8, something like that. Like they've added something like an entire extra billion transistors into the A8X, which I guess is how you get 2.5 times faster graphics. I mean, like, it all sounds fantastic. The Pixelmated demo was so impressive. The speed with which it's doing these things.
Very high resolutions as well.
Yeah, exactly. And the replay, the video editor, is sort of less impressive just in most situations, but if you know about how long it takes to normally stitch these things together or render them, kind of, rendering that stuff in real time on the Mac doesn't take you need a 7th Mac to do it. It's not easy.
And the cameras then, because we got an upgrade to the cameras, but not to the extent of the iPhone 6th generation cameras. Basically, as far as I can tell from the specs they quoted, it is almost literally, and possibly exactly literally, an iPhone 5S camera. They put at the backward-facing one at least.
Pretty much everything matches. 2.4 f aperture, the megapixel size, all the
specs.
All the core specs, and even it does 120 frames per second slow-mo, exactly like the 5S did. So it really does sound like it's the 5S's sensor in an iPad, which is great. Like, as much as we all made fun of iPad photography when it started taking off, it just is happening. So if I was Apple, yeah, I'd be taking advantage of it too.
It's a little bit like I've never been comfortable with people make too much out of people doing iPad photography, because even though it does look a little bit ridiculous, it only looks ridiculous because we're not used to seeing it. And the more we see it, the less ridiculous it becomes. And also, the people I see taking pictures with their iPads are usually tourists. Now, granted, I live in a very touristy town. I see people taking pictures with their iPads quite often, and I'm fine with that. You know, you're on holiday, you have your iPad with you because it's your device that does everything else, and why wouldn't you take photographs with it? And now, at least the photographs you take with it will be pretty reasonable.
Yeah. It's just, if people want to take photographs, then give them a way to take photographs. Like, as much as we can talk culturally about the however we want to feel about iPad photography, Apple's job is just to give people things to buy that do the things they want, and so it is. So yeah, I will continue not to do a lot of iPad photography, but good luck to the people who will.
There's another cheers to that too, Matt. As you, one other thing before we move on from the iPad Air 2 was that there was an announcement which actually wasn't an announcement at all. Apple didn't mention this, but if you click through to the wireless page of the iPad, at least in the US and the UK Apple pages, there's a thing there about a new Apple SIM that you can order.
Yeah, this has been Apple's been proposing this for years, but it kept getting kind of held up in I guess sort of regulatory stuff.
It was even proposed for a while, wasn't it, that it would be sort of burned in. It would be a fixed SIM soldered to the logic board, which would mean you wouldn't have to have a little tray so that it'd save a bit of volume and etc. etc.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess it's going ahead. I haven't really been able to speak to anyone about it since we kind of spotted that it was happening. But I mean, there's definitely a convenience factor to it. Absolutely.
And the point of this is that you have this Apple SIM in the iPad, and then you can sign up for any carrier that you want. I say any carrier you want. They are partnering with particular carriers, so that in the UK, for example, the only one that's there is EE at the moment, but there's an asterisk on that, and it says carriers are liable to change. So the idea would be that you are in the UK, you get an iPad, you tap a button and you sign up with a carrier, but then you go to the States and you tap the button again and you can sign up for a different carrier over there when you're on holiday there if you want to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, just while we're on these kind of extra peripheral things, before we get on to kind of the last of the hardware, Tim Cook said there would be a chance to try out Apple Pay, but sadly there was not at the event I was at.
Ah, well that was a question from Martin Johnson. By the way, remember, if you're watching this, you can ask questions, and I'll put them to Matt if I deem them valid. And that was one that Martin answered. But no, we didn't get a chance to try Apple Pay, sadly. But to be honest, I've seen our US counterparts and our US friends doing it, and it's hilarious because it's not an impressive thing, because by the very nature of the fact that it is so simple and designed to be so transparent and elegant, it's just somebody putting their iPhone against a reader and pressing their thumb on the thing, and it just that's it, happens. And I sense everyone's slight disappointment.
Yeah, I had hoped they would talk about international Apple Pay stuff today, because we've got 500 banks in. You think, well, that must mean some international banks. But yeah, shrug.
Which brings us to somebody else's question I've lost now, but it was talking about iTunes Radio as well. And again, like iTunes Radio, we still haven't seen launching outside the US. Well, no, we launched in Australia, didn't it?
Yeah, I was trying to.
And Apple's international expansions do seem to be a little bit mired. But in fairness, these are incredibly complex deals to do, incredibly complex partnerships to work up.
They are, absolutely. But if anyone can do these complex partnerships, we know it's Apple, we know it's Eddie Q, and these days Jimmy Iovine.
Yeah. I'm actually, before we move on to the iPads, Darren Gilpin asked, do you think most current iPad owners will bother upgrading to the new ones?
When we say current iPad, do we mean iPad Air 1 owners?
He doesn't specify, but let's imagine he does, and I suspect the answer to that is no. But let's imagine he's talking about 2, 3, 4 owners.
4's a tough one, because 1, 2, 3, I say you should absolutely, if you've got the money available, you should absolutely be going and looking at the iPad.
It's only for the weight, because the 2 was okay, but the 1 and the 3 were very heavy things, and the Air and the Air 2 are going to be transformationally different, I would say.
Yeah, the Air was transformationally different. The Air 2, not transformationally different from the Air, but that's okay. It's still brilliant, really, and the power of it means that longevity-wise, it should be, really capable for a long time to come with whatever we keep generating, whatever these developers come up with to keep the iPad churning over. 4 is a bit more of a judgment call. Again, I'd say it's the size and weight you want to be looking at there. I don't know how many people will actually do things where they really, really want to update for the speed difference between those two. I don't know if it's large enough that most people will see the benefit unless you are doing these really intensive things. The weight.
There is the camera upgrade to consider as well, and that's a big jump over the iPad 4.
There is, absolutely. Otherwise, the 4 is a difficult one. It's only 2 years old. If you can sell it on for a good price, I'd say it's maybe worth trying to, see if you can pay the extra 150 between selling on your old one and upgrading to this one. Especially if you were, let's say you bought 16 gig and you were starting to find that pokey. Now that the Air 2 has brought 64 gig down to the price that 32 gig used to be, that's a nice upgrade opportunity as well, or a nice reason for an upgrade. Generally I'd say the iPad Air to the iPad Air 2. Again, unless you've got the money lying around, don't know if I'd bother.
I keep trying to get onto the Retina Mini. The iPad Mini.
Touch ID. Some people just don't want to live without Touch ID, and I don't blame them for that.
Well, which is interesting. In fact, let's get on to the Retina Mini 3, because essentially the only thing that's changed with that is that it has Touch ID and it comes in gold.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it has faster networking stuff. I don't know if you caught that at all.
Oh, I haven't dug into that detail, but certainly from the headline specs, if you look at the Retina Mini and what they're calling the iPad Mini 3, Apple's naming conventions have gone back and forward with these bloody iPads. But if you look at the brand new iPad Mini and the one preceding it, basically the only thing to change is Touch ID, and yet they're still selling both of them.
The problem with what they've done is they've made the iPad Mini 2, which is the Retina iPad Mini as we know it now, a better deal than the new one they've just introduced. This is one case where I think they should have just not given... they've given us too good a cheap option. I think it's so much better value than just going for the one with Touch ID. Again, I don't blame you if you're willing to pay that premium essentially for Touch ID.
And it's even the case, I think, that the people who will buy that one are people who have a device with Touch ID on it already and get irritated when they go to the iPad and it doesn't have it on it.
Yeah, it's just like if someone just came up and said, I want a Retina level iPad, which would you recommend? And I want the Mini because I don't want to spend as much as the Air. I would have to. Right now, I feel like I would have to recommend the iPad Mini 2 rather than the more expensive one, because it's a better deal.
Yeah.
It seems like they really should have just replaced it. I guess in some ways I'm glad I haven't. They've given a better consumer option. Seems like a weird decision though.
It does, and in fact, if you look at the iPad lineup just now, it is a very un-Apple-like lineup. And in fact, Phil Schiller, I think, when he was talking about it, even used language that I thought was quite unusual. It talked about something at every size and at every price point for every one. It wasn't literally those words, but that was the sense he was coming with. And right enough, if you look at the iPad Mini, the iPad Mini 2, the iPad Mini 3, the iPad Air, and the iPad Air 2, that's a lot of complexity, and trying to make a decision as a punter between those before you even go into the options for LTE and Wi-Fi and then colors and capacity. I haven't added it up, but there must be the thick end of 70 models in the lineup now.
Who knows? Pure speculation this, but we know that iPad sales aren't increasing at the rate they were. Maybe this is calculated to by having more price points. Maybe they're hoping that sales will be stimulated a little bit more than if they had just done the traditional replacement routine.
Yeah. One quick question on one of the omissions from tonight's event, and it's Fabio Vergi again asking about the Retina MacBook Air, and he's wondering if it's planned obsolescence by Apple, because he says surely if they could do it, they would have done it already, and I don't think that's true.
Depending on where they're at with it, which I have no idea, basically my theory is when the next batch of Intel chips come, we might get a Retina MacBook Air. Intel's next batch of chips are due to be a big jump forward in power for the wattage and heatage used.
And that's very important. The thermal envelope is important, i.e. the amount of heat that's been generated and how it's been contained in the thing, how it's been dealt with, but also the amount of power it pulls, because if you're literally powering a Retina display, that's going to have a very, very strong negative impact on the battery life of the devices, and Apple has always had recently had a really strong emphasis on very strong battery life, and Apple will have to balance that. If you've gone from a 12-hour or a 9-hour MacBook Air as they are currently to a 5 or 6 hour MacBook Air with Retina, that's going to be a really bad marketing message for Apple. So they have to somehow square that circle, and one of the ways you can do it, as you say, is to reduce the power requirements of the chips themselves.
Exactly. There's basically a huge bunch of reasons why you can imagine that doing a Retina MacBook Air is tied to what Intel can give Apple to do. Can give them what chips it can give them, and Intel keeps delaying its next generation. At the moment, it doesn't look like we'll have MacBook Air suitable chips until first or second quarter next year, maybe kind of March or so. Apple might get them sooner, so maybe we'll see a launch or something like a MacBook Air in March or so. That's if they don't get delayed again. If I had to put money on what's happening, it would be that the right internals aren't available, and it's not going to launch until they are, because it wants that battery life, because it doesn't want a MacBook Air that kicks out so much more noise than the current ones do, that gets hot.
It's also worth pointing out that the Retina MacBook Pros have become very, very slim and svelte now, and the difference in the ergonomics and the sort of feel of MacBook Air compared to what were traditionally the big, heavy Apple portables is much, much less defined than it once was. And although I can understand people's appetite for the Retina MacBook Air, it's not as necessary as it once was, because the 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro, for example, is a cracking little machine and really quite light.
No, I agree. I am talking to you on one right now, after all, and I've been using it all day doing work online, editing images, writing things, and I still have some battery left. They're not loads.
Well, on that point, you have, as you say, been working for and travelling now for 14 hours, 15 hours straight. So I think it's only fair to let you get off to your kip, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you. But I just want to say, for all the kind of stuff we've been talking about today, which is a little bit, I wish Apple had done a little bit better here. I don't see why it's done this. I don't see why it's done that. There was a lot of good stuff announced. The Retina iMac is pretty astonishing. Just the size and shape of the iPad Air 2 is wonderful. And okay, we're maybe a little disappointed the iPad Mini 3 isn't a bigger upgrade than it is, but it was already a really good little machine. And now the iPad Mini 2 is even cheaper than it was. It's an even better machine than it was. And the Mac Mini, yeah, there's things I wish were better, but it's nice. It's nice. And quieter than it. And that's, what it's for.
Yes, well, we will, of course, have reviews of all this new stuff coming up in future issues of MacFormat. Once we get a chance to get our hands on them for a longer period of time than Matt's had today, and once we get a chance to properly put them through their paces, we'll have full formal reviews of them in the magazine. I should remind you, of course, that you can get a free trial to MacFormat's iPad edition inside of our app, and you can get that by going to macformat.com/iPad. You can sign up for free, try the magazine. I'm sure you'll love it. Let us know what you think. You can also subscribe to MacFormat's YouTube channel at youtube.com/MacFormatUK, and you can watch previous episodes of MacFormat's weekly Apple Extravaganza. We do the show every week, not quite like this. Matt's not usually in a plush 5-star Berlin hotel. That's usually me. That's it for the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your questions. And this will be archived up on YouTube. Share it around, let people know what's there, and by all means, send your questions in to us on our Twitter account, which is @MacFormat. But Matt, thank you very much for joining us. Go and have a sleep.
Thank you all. Bye.